What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. Usually I wait until Sunday for any box office commentary and or analysis, but a story has just dropped on Variety that's so juicy and so interesting. I can't wait. I got to talk about it now because what we have are two separate fascinating stories colliding like two trains on the same track. Because on one hand, Joker Folie, Deux, aka Joker 2, might be about to suffer the worst second weekend drop of any superhero movie ever. I mean, usually if a movie drops somewhere between like 70 and 80% in its second weekend, that is like, a biblical level failure. Joker Folie Deux might surpass that, but at the same time, we have yet another movie about a killer clown made for 1/100th the scale that is going to beat the pants off of it. Like, the idea of a $2 million independent film about a killer clown surpassing the second weekend of one of the most beloved pop culture icons in all of comic book history, it's just unfathomable to me. And it reminds me of the 1990s when suddenly independent filmmakers started to eat the lunch of the big studios. There was a year, I think it was the spring of 97, talking about movies that came out in 1996, where I think of the 5 movies nominated for Best Picture at that time, 4 of them were quote-unquote independent films, foreign films, specialty films. And I remember at the time, everybody was like writing all these panicked articles about like, oh my God, like what's happening? Like, how come Hollywood doesn't know how to make like Best Picture contenders anymore and that sort of thing? But I think we're having a similar phenomenon here where like a punk rock filmmaker, Damien Leone, who comes from the world of special effects, who's been like, battling in the trenches for the last 15 years, making short films and low budget films. And now he's finally gotten to the point where anywhere from like a $2 million budget to a $2.5 million budget, but he's working with what is for him a much larger budget. And fans are just eating it up. Like, it is serving up on a platter everything that the fans of the Terrifier franchise want to see. And in stark contrast, Joker Folie Deux is providing the exact opposite experience that a lot of fans of the Joker want to see. And I'm not one of those purists that likes to yank off their loafer and bang it on the table and say that the customer is always right. Because when it comes to movies, at least, sometimes the customer doesn't know what they want until they see it. Like, we must always remain open-minded to a surprise. Like, market research won't lead you to a movie like Alien or Star Wars or Rocky or Jaws or The Godfather. Like, the 1970s was full of surprises like The Exorcist, where people didn't know what they wanted until they were just absolutely gobsmacked by what they saw on the screen. So we must always remain open to the possibility that the filmmaker might be a step or two ahead of us. However, when it comes to franchise filmmaking, where you have a built-in fan base that loves and adores a particular character, whether that's the Joker or Art the Clown, to a certain degree, you gotta dance with the person that you took to the prom, or things can go horribly wrong. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling that Joker, after the first movie, made over $1 billion on a relatively small budget for a studio movie and won Joaquin Phoenix Best Actor, that the movie could completely, totally, I guess, go in the opposite direction of where everybody wanted it to go, apart from director Todd Phillips. What I think most people wanted to see is the Joker, the clown prince of crime, going on a rampage, burning Gotham to the ground, and then Batman shows up and knocks his fucking teeth out. Like, that would have been a satisfying Joker movie. And if along the way he and Harley Quinn got to fall in love, or if at the very end she killed him according to Todd Phillips' wishes, like, obviously he wanted some sort of ending that would, put the character to bed for all time. But something more or less in the realm of like the superhero genre would have been satisfying to the legions of fans. And it's just so funny how Todd Phillips was so completely disconnected from what the fans of the first movie wanted versus the movie that he wanted to make. But if he had managed to surprise people and make them happy, like, maybe we would be having a very different discussion. But the reality is, this is one of the most high-profile, crushing defeats or crushing box office failures in recent memory. And the fact that it comes along right as Terrifier 3 is just delivering the audience experience that fans of the franchise crave so desperately. It just makes the story irresistible. And admittedly, Terrifier 3 is not for everybody. The appeal of that film is niche. It's got some pretty hardcore gore, as well as a lot of really dark humor, like really dark humor mixed with horrific violence. But there is an audience that eats that shit up with a spoon. And I feel like the success of Terrifier 3, what it's showing to me is that there's a decent number of people out there who are tired of kind of corporate approved big studio content that just feels interchangeable and bland and risk averse, that's never going to offend anybody. Like, if a screenplay to a movie feels like it was basically, like, people are always fighting for screenplay approval, whether that's an actor who wants script approval or a director or whomever. Like, everybody wants to have final control over which screenplay is going to get shot. And there are a lot of movies out there these days where it feels like final script approval came from the human resources department at a big studio as opposed to an interesting dynamic filmmaker. Whereas Terrifier 3, warts and all, the good and the bad, this is the story that Damien Leone wanted to tell. And also, the story he wanted to tell happens to be in complete alignment with the story that his fans were craving and hoping for, because in the end, it does deliver the goods. It delivers some scares, it delivers some laughs, it delivers some gore, it delivers a little skin. Like, it is a good time at the movies. And I think for a lot of people, they saw Joker 2 and like, this is not a good time at the movies at all. This is a total bummer. Like, what the hell's going on? And I don't even like musicals. Like, what are we doing here? But let's head over to Variety, where they've got some specifics and some numbers that we can break down in greater detail. So the article is by Pat Saperstein, and it's called Box Office Terrifier 3 Scares Off Fast-Dropping Joker Folie on Friday. Audiences are apparently ready for a different kind of clown as Terrifier 3 is scaring off the second week of Joker Folie at the weekend box office. Gorefest Terrifier 3 is estimated to have taken in $8.2 million on Friday, heading for a weekend that could be upwards of $17 million. And let me pause my first interruption. That is absolutely fantastic, because the early estimates for, like, the optimistic estimates for Terrifier 3 were that it would gross about $11 million on its opening weekend. It's vastly exceeding that. And to put that in context, Terrifier 2, which was made for $250,000, its final box office tally was $15 million. So here we are. Terrifier 3 might be surpassing the entire box office tally of its predecessor in its opening weekend. Terrifier 3 is playing in 2,514 locations through distributor Cineverse, headed by Chris McGurk. The gory threequel is stoking controversy for its violence, and in a stroke of good old-fashioned horror movie showmanship, the film has launched a hotline for people who want to complain about the carnage. Yeah, I found the image over on Twitter. It's absolutely hilarious. Then on the official Twitter account for the movie, they posted this customer notice from one theater where I can't quite tell if this is in jest or serious, where they're basically offering people a calm place to sit and a cup of water if they're too shocked by the violence in this unrated movie. And that's one thing that's amazing. This movie's unrated. I can't remember the last time an unrated movie generated some decent box office. But even if there are some people out there who might be, overdoing it when it comes to their shock and horror, I mean, in the end, a horror movie is a little bit like going to see a magician, where they have certain props and they're trying to achieve a certain effect. And no matter how gory and repugnant and fucked up the movie might be, it's all pretend, it's all make-believe. It's basically people playing with stage makeup and Play-Doh. Like, everybody should just calm down and at least pretend to be an adult. It's an unrated movie. You have to be an adult to go see it. So try acting like one. But I love how Terrifier 3 is leaning into the controversy, leaning into the pushback, because we live in an era where no movies are basically in that lane. Every other movie feels so safe and so devoid of controversy and so bland and so devoid of flavor. So once again, I have to admit, I went into this weekend very biased, rooting hard for Terrifier 3, but it's wildly exceeding my highest expectations in terms of performance. But getting back to the article, meanwhile, family animated tale The Wild Robot in week 3 and the 6th weekend of Warner Brothers' Beetlejuice, with $1.95 million on Friday, are both seeing more action than Joker Folie à Deux, which plunged more than 80% to $2.2 million on Friday. The Warner Brothers sequel, starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, is estimated to make somewhat under $7 million for the weekend for a $46.7 million cum. DreamWorks Animation / Universal's The Wild Robot brought in $3.8 million on Friday, heading for a possible $13.8 million weekend. And I'm going to skip ahead a bit. Ticket sales for the Joker sequel's second weekend were projected to be at least in the double digits, so the massive decline was larger even than the more pessimistic estimates. Joker Folie à Deux opened last weekend with a lackluster $37.6 million after poor reviews and unenthusiastic word of mouth. I mean, there's a weird side of me, I guess a devilish side of me, that takes immense satisfaction in watching kind of a punk rock filmmaker at a very small scale making the big studios seem old and out of touch and boring. But that's precisely what a lot of studio filmmaking is. And when so many big studio movies out there feel compromised in their intentions or their artistic integrity, where they just feel diluted, censored, defanged, declawed, where they're offering none of the things that we want to see, it's nice to see a little movie that comes along that is uncompromised, that is undiluted, uncensored, and just fucking goes for the jugular, quite literally. I feel like this is just a perfect illustration where if you have limited resources and you're making a movie, put something on the screen that you would never see in a big budget movie. That's one of the reasons that the independent movie craze was so fucking awesome in the 1990s, is that you had directors like Todd Solondz who would come along and make a dark comedy like Happiness. It never would be made by like Gary Marshall working for Columbia or something like that. Like you could only see that kind of entertainment if you were going to see independent movies or renting the VHS or the DVD or whatever the case might be. So as I said in my review for Terrifier 3, the independent film scene needs 50 to 100 more people just like Damien Leone. I'm not saying they all need to make, graphic, hardcore, unrated horror movies, but people who are offering stories and just feelings and experiences that you'll never get in these big studio products. And if a movie like Joker 2 is failing this abysmally, clearly the audience is ready for and hungry for some experiences that are totally different from what a studio like Warner Brothers is trying to offer. So I'll have more to say on this topic tomorrow once we have a clearer picture of the final box office tallies, and I'll obviously be talking about some of the other movies opening this weekend as well. But let's just call this weekend the triumph of the underdog, and everybody loves a good underdog story. If the underdog comes out of nowhere and knocks out the heavy hitter. And what's hilarious is how I follow a lot of podcasts about the movie business, how there are a lot of official commentators who all they do all day, every day is analyze the box office landscape, the competitive landscape, and a lot of them hadn't even heard of the Terrifier franchise. It was totally off their radar. And I love how all the experts, everybody loves to see the experts confounded from time to time. I love seeing how they're like, what is Terrifier? Where did it come from? None of them have ever even seen the Terrifier movies, but maybe they should try listening to the audience as opposed to listening to critics, or listening to the fans as opposed to market research, and so on and so forth. And they might find that they can make more movies that resonate with wider audiences. So this is a triumph for horror fans all around. Damien Leone absolutely deserves every dollar that's coming his way, and I just can't wait to see what he does next, whether it's Terrifier 4, a fresh franchise, but I imagine his days of operating in obscurity are over, and he'll be getting some big offers. Let's just hope that he can get some big offers where he's able to hang on to his unrated style of storytelling, because if he sells out for a paycheck and goes to work for the big studios, his audience will turn on him the same way they have on Joker, Folie, Deux. But something tells me Damien Leone is just getting started, and hopefully the best is yet to come. But I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell, and I'll be back at you tomorrow for a full box office breakdown. But until then, onwards and upwards. Onwards and upwards.